everyone. This is again Ash and Simon from the Nice Game Bunker in Bonn for one of the last times when we actually record a video for Vampire Heritage. And today it's going to be our campaign components overview.
So the theme in the Vampire the Masquerade Heritage Chronicle is really very simple. What we've actually left as far as the meta-narrative in the Chronicle Booklet is that each of the players is a very ancient, very powerful vampire indeed, and together we are children of the same sire. Now right at the beginning, we slay that sire, and everything that comes after that is this centuries-long battle between rival sibling children to see which one is going to be dominant. So the way that we do this is that we're going to play through 21 chapters. Each one of these is sort of set in a particular city, and then every 3 chapters an era comes to a close, battlegrounds change, we go through time, and we see who is dominant. One of the activities that you're doing on this really grand level is that we're doing 2 things. We are completing missions and making role-playing-esque decisions as a character ourselves, and that's going to give us our own stats. We'll get into that later. But then by winning games, by dominating chapters, we're going to shape the world in our own image. So that if you're a really savage, cruel kind of character, you want the world to be savage and cruel, because then this is an advantage. It makes you strong, and it means you're going to win the Chronicle ultimately. Whereas if you're more of a diplomat, you're more of a people person, you're going to shape the world so that these traits are more valuable.
Right, and if we're talking how the theme comes through here and maybe also the meta mechanics of the campaign, then one thing to consider is also that through the course of these 21 games, we are shaping the game with the choices we make, but we also have human interactions. We also have people rising in power, maybe gaining the help of a powerful retainer, other people trying to kill off that retainer because it gets annoying that they win each game with that thing. People gaining obligations for winning, that's disadvantages that kind of set off the winner's advantage in the next game, and so on and so forth.
Right, there's lots of these decisions you'll be making, and a lot of it is going to be political in nature as far as what's gonna annoy a particular opponent, what's going to benefit you, and so on.
Right, so the best thing we can imagine for people coming back to is that Heritage has permanently destroyed their friendships.
Yeah, that's the goal.
So the first component that we want to take a closer look at today is the player sheet, because that's actually where everyone will start their journey by choosing a name for their character, their first specialty, and their first title.
Exactly. We have a prologue step which allows all of the players to sort of claim the player sheet as their own. It also walks you through some of the mechanics. The first is, of course, a name. So you have a player name, but then you have a character name, because we're going to be building this over all of the 21 chapters that we go through. You choose your first trait, a free dot. If you're sort of familiar with the role-playing game, you'll recognize that in either resources, ability, or psyche. And beneath these, we have sub-traits. So within resources, we have kindred, mortals, and wealth. So you choose one of these dots, and then you choose a discipline mastery to begin with, such as animalism, fortitude, and so on, and then a title. And this is all of these things at this moment. They will have mechanical impacts, but we don't really know what they will be yet as players. So this is really thematic. It's about choosing where you maybe invest in the same thing as other players, or where you go your own way. So
right. I always like to start the game by explaining to the other players exactly how I'm going to play, by naming myself Valerian the Merciful, and then being merciful all game long.
Right. And I like to call myself something the second, because then it's funny when I invariably lose.
Right. I think about the traits, what we can say is, while players cannot know exactly the impact, there is a bit of a way to guess what it could mean, at least in terms of the kinds of stickers that you can unlock. So, for example, if I'm choosing the cruelty, my dot in cruelty, then the stickers that will unlock later on will tend to have that thematic anchoring, and so on and so forth.
Exactly. I think this is something that we have through a lot of the game, which is that if you trust in the theme and you sort of invest in it, and you trust that ticking a cruel dot on your character sheet will have implications, it does. It's going to affect the kind of World of Darkness that you build together.
After you've completed the prologue, you've chosen your first retainer, you've filled out the player sheet, you're ready to basically jump into the first game, the first chapter of the campaign.
And every chapter is going to be drawn from the top of the Chronicle Deck, which is a thick deck with cards in a very specific order. And you just draw from this, and it reveals all of these cards here we're looking at now, the mission cards for each chapter, as well as the chapter overview cards. But it also has the general flow of history, so the basic characters that become available and join your Chronicle, as well as the rewards that you'll get as you go through the Chronicle.
Exactly. So if you take a look here, that's the first setup of the first game. We're starting at the bottom with the chapter card, front and back. On the front there is a little quote. That's a contemporary quote, I guess you would say. And on the back of the card there's a bit more information. Where are we? Currently in Rhodes in 1306. And on the top you can see the mission spread for this game, and this basically sets the scene for the game that you're in. So we can see we have missions about sailing the Mediterranean, because there have been advances in sailing. We have missions about the Templars. We have something with the Divina Commedia, something with a certain Marco, a mortal from Venice, who claims to have visited a wondrously remote kingdom, and something about the Great Famine that took place in 1315.
Right, and the way that these missions interact with the game is that these are symbols you'll recognize from previous videos. These are archetypes and attributes that characters can have, and these become goals for our bloodline. So they have a sort of a goal setting function throughout the game. The game is over, we determine the winner, and we follow all the normal rules. And then each of these missions is given to a particular player, the player who had the most clandestine vampires in their bloodline, or the most warlike vampires in their bloodline. And then if we flip over some of these cards, we will see there are rewards on the other side.
Slight spoiler warnings here, but if you take a look now, you can see the backside of the 3 of the first 5 missions in the game, and you can see how these are built. So first of all, if I've resolved this mission, if I've gained enough of a certain attribute to dominate the Mediterranean, then now with this Sailing the Mediterranean mission, I have a chance of establishing a network of contacts, and that gives me a choice. So I can use this network of contacts to smuggle exotic goods, which will increase my wealth on my player sheet, or I can use it to spy on my adversaries, which will increase my subterfuge, which again allows me to use different stickers, but also gives me potentially, if the world develops in that way, additional points in the campaign.
Right, and these, in this case, wealth or subterfuge, the trait that you choose to improve, this is just recorded on the player sheet that we looked at earlier.
Exactly. And then the final part of each mission is a more concrete reward. In this case, it's an asset, and it's the Levant Contacts. We've not talked a lot about assets before, but it's kind of... well, I guess it's self-explanatory. It's an asset that you can use during the campaign by discarding it to gain an advantage in an individual game.
Right. These are quite subtle, I think, but they are one of the few direct kind of currencies, like resources you can take from a game and bring it into the next one to help you win the next game. There are 3 kind of broad types of rewards that you could get, as you can see on the other cards. All of them have this narrative element where you're given a situation, and how you choose to respond to it determines the sort of character that you develop. But then there are 3 main kinds of rewards. The first one is the assets, which we just talked about, and there's 4 different kinds of assets. Then the others are elevating basic characters. So this is how, as you've seen, I'm sure previous times before, you've seen character cards being flipped, going from a mere mortal passing through history without anyone really caring about them into an ancile, a really powerful kind of player now in this chronicle, and you get to choose which one in your bloodline that's going to be. And the advantage there is you then get to be the first one to potentially choose to retain them, take them into your haven, and potentially bring them into the next chapter.
Right. In my mind, there's an additional advantage here because even if I don't retain them, this is basically a chance to shape the way the game is going. If I elevate the Lady of the Bagels, that's going to have a different result than if I elevate the Cruel General or the Assassin and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So we're making these choices about the kind of World of Darkness we're making.
Exactly. Now, the third kind of reward that you can receive is kind of similar in a way. It's unlocking historical or lore characters. So I think we've shown Dante before, so this is not a huge spoiler here. It's the first game is kind of known if you've been following our videos. So that's a character that you can unlock, and we've also talked about these in the character overviews. But suffice it to say, that's another thing that you get for completing a mission. So after that first game, you're still going to take a look at this chapter overview card, and then there's a bunch of more things that come into play here.
Right. Now that the missions have been assigned to players, we've finished the game, we need to look at who is the victor, who had the most victory points in this game, and who was the vanquished, who came last. And there's consequences for each of them. For the victor, they get a title. So if we look at this card here, they become the Grand Hospitaller, and they're going to add this to their player sheet, and it's a title that they claim for the rest of time as theirs. Nobody else can take that from them, and it's of course worth 1 point at the end of the Chronicle.
Right, and what we expect of players is actually that they start calling each other by these titles that they gain, and that's the only way to play the game. So the Grand Hospitaller, Ash over there, that's how I'm calling him in office as well when he enters.
Right.
Make way for the Grand Hospitaller.
And ideally by the end you've got this long name like the Queen or something, which is beautiful.
Right.
And then finally for the vanquished, the player gritting their teeth in last place, they get to plot. And the way that plot works is it's a way to cultivate the clan that they just played with, the clan that came in last place. At the beginning of the Chronicle, each clan only has 7 clan schemes, but there is for each of them another 7 in the research deck, which will be unlocked in this way throughout play.
Exactly, and that is a way for us to balance the game, because obviously no one would just lose because they're bad at the game. It must be the cards that are not sufficient. So we give a way to immediately rectify that situation. And the other balancing mechanism that is in the game is the obligation cards. And the way that works is, again, for the winner of each chapter, there is an obligation card to be drawn. If you keep winning, you get more obligation cards. And if you lose, you get rid of, whenever you don't win, you get rid of one of these.
Yeah, these are a little bit like the Super Mario Kart kind of elastic band effects. And the way that they work is there is a small negative that will trigger at the beginning of the game that will sort of give you a disadvantage compared with the other players. It's still very possible to win with an obligation or
and
two.
It's very annoying to lose against someone who has 2 obligations. It's kind of bragging rights, and we've tried to make the cards in that way as well.
And the way that we record everything that happens in the Chronicle is like this. Every spread in the Chronicle Booklet is a particular era. So this is a sort of coherent set of 3 chapters, and we're going to have a single player that dominates this particular era. How do we find out who that is? After each chapter, we simply record the results from top to bottom, first to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place, depending on the number of players that you have. And this is going to score a variable number of error points. So we see in the first chapter of the era, there's 2 error points for being in 1st place, and if you're 4th, you're going to get 0 for that. This escalates though, so that the 3rd error in each chapter is worth more points. And we also record the clan, so you can keep a little bit of an eye on the meta game that's developing, depending on the characters that come into play, the stickers you put on them, and the clan schemes that are researched out. So you can see the clan there, as well as the players. And then after the 3rd chapter in this era, one of these battlegrounds is going to be resolved, In this case, it's the of clans high and low, and you get to write your name there as the player. They're forever marked as dominating the era.
These choices of the individual eras get also recorded in the Chronicle booklet. At the end of the booklet, there's this spread where you can record the choices and also the implications for the whole game campaign scoring.
Right, on the left we see the Chronicle scoring sheet, which shows the value of each of these traits. So you might be a very cruel vampire, which could be a good thing if you cultivate the world so that it values that. Or it could be a world where wealth is all important, or warfare is all important. Now on the right, this is just a simple way to track the era outcomes. So for of clans high and low, it could be the dark aristocracy, or we could be equal in death. And we're going to record that depending on the player choice.
Here is a little bit of detail of how these choices of shaping the world work in the game, with the example of the clans high and low.
Right, these are the two possible ways that history could branch in your world of darkness, as the clan's high and low battleground is resolved by the dominant player in that era. So there's two cards that simply get drawn from the Chronicle deck, like everything else, at the end of that third chapter. And then we consult the Chronicle booklet, see who had the most era points, and that player can choose dark aristocracy and then equal in death. Now, the traits at the bottom, wealth and cruelty, or warfare and mercy, the player choosing these, it doesn't necessarily increase their traits in this way. What it does is it modifies the value of these in the world. So it's a way of trying to maximize the difference between the other players, whether that's hurting another one more than it hurts you, or nudging out an extra point. And we'll get into this later in the strategy, but at the beginning of the Chronicle, there's not very much variance in the player traits, but as this goes on, there can be a huge amount of points up for grabs for being the player that dominates that era and gets to choose what things are worth.
The other way to impact the world and also to change your copy of Heritage throughout a campaign playthrough is obviously the way you upgrade your characters with stickers, with names, and so on and so forth.
And if we look at a sticker sheet more closely, we can see that they are split in the same way that the character sheets are between these traits. And the way that this works is that at the end of the chapter, everyone has an opportunity to apply a sticker to any vampire in their bloodline that has a free space for it, but they are constrained because you need to, as on your player sheet, have the right trait at the right strength in order to bestow that ability onto a vampire in play. So mortals or warfare have different flavors, and each of these stickers are unique, with the exception of the level 7, which is always bonded, and this is a way to permanently tie a vampire to a particular clan. So this is a Nosferatu vampire forever. It's a very powerful way to sort of cement the strengths of clans, but you need to invest heavily to be able to do this.
We've introduced now a lot of the components and a lot of the different systems that go into the campaign, and now we want to talk a little bit about how that all connects to an experience, and what kind of strategies there are, what kind of decisions you can take, and so on and so forth.
Right, and I think a good place to start here is how you actually win the Chronicle, what your win state looks like at the end, and it's very simple. At the end of the 21st chapter, we're going to look at everyone's player sheet, and we're going to take the traits that they have accumulated throughout history, the kind of player character that they've generated, and we're going to multiply each trait by its value. And the value is going to be shown at the back of the Chronicle booklet. So you've just got to keep that in mind. It's very simple. You're going to be completing missions to gain these traits, and then you're going to be winning games and therefore winning eras in order to set the value of those traits. And it's important. The most important strategy is you need to be doing both. If you have only one side of this equation, you're not going to win the Chronicle.
Exactly. So there is always a kind of balancing act with each of the assets and each of the actions that you take in the game, where you want those missions because that will give you the traits, but you also need to win the games and the eras in order to determine that your trades are actually worth something.
Exactly. So it becomes it's a question of how much you're wanting to invest, and one thing that comes in at this point is the relative value of the chapter in the era. So the first chapter is not worth as many points as the final chapter in the era, and that's done partly to keep the era viable. Any player can technically, if things go especially at 4 players, things need to go just right in the last chapter for you to dominate the era, but it is still possible for you. But the other thing this does is it gives us sort of terrain to the chapters, so that some are more valuable, some are less. Some of them maybe you might focus on missions more. Some of them you really need to win that era, because as I said, especially in the later eras, there's a lot of points up for grabs.
The other thing that we've not really gone into at all yet is the other moving parts in the game that also play into this. For example, how did the clans develop? How did the characters develop? Does someone have a very strong retainer that you want to keep in check? Has someone developed a clan that maybe you want to take in the next game, so that they can't keep gaining the benefits from that?
Right. There's I think a common moment at the end of every chapter where you might look at the clan that just won and think that they're just way too strong. They're like, that's all that's going on, is this player has the good clan and you had the bad clan, and of course that's why that happens. Well, we have a sort of like response to that in the game, which is that at the beginning of the next chapter, the player who came last is going to get first choice of the clan, because you're not going to be playing the Nosferatu all the way along. I mean, you could technically, it's very unlikely to happen, because the choice of choosing a clan depends on the last game. So that's
exactly something. So if I've just won with the Nosferatu, I'm going to be the last
exactly.
to choose. So
if people think you're just winning because you've got these black markets in play and you keep dominating, they're going to take it from you. You're going to have to adapt to that.
As you can see, there's a lot of different influences that can determine whether how you act in an individual game. Do you maybe want to hold back a bit because you've already got too many obligations and you want to give someone else a spotlight? Do you want to use your asset now, or do you want to save that up for a later moment, and so on and so forth?
Right, and the missions can become very critical, because what you do when you decide that you want to shed an obligation, say, in preparation for the last game of the chapter, or the last game of the era, sorry, is you might focus on missions instead. But the thing about missions is players can see what you're doing. They can influence this. They can take characters from the queue that you want to try to beat you to those missions. They can place your vampires into torpor. So there is, towards the sort of the end of a game, there is an element where some of the meta can sort of bleed into this a little bit.
Right, and the final thing that connects with this, and that is basically one of the biggest messages we have about the campaign of Heritage, is there are so many factors, including player interactions, including stickers, including how you shape the world with your mission choices, with your era choices, and so on and so forth. There are so many ways the campaign can develop, that in the end you're going to have to find your own strategies and your own ways to deal with it and to go through in your player group, in your copy of Heritage.
And that brings us to the end of the overview video showing how the Chronicle works, the theme, the mechanics, and a little bit of our strategy. As you can see, it's a legacy game. We don't know exactly how your World of Darkness is going to roll out. But thank you for watching this series.
Right, and this was a lot to unpack, so if you have additional questions, we are happy to answer them in the comments. And as always, if you liked what you've seen, give us a like, subscribe, and check out all the other stuff we have and will have in the future. See you!